Hi, welcome back to my channel if you've been here before. If you haven't, I'm Gemma and I talk about books. A little while ago I decided to rewatch one of my favourite ever films and then read the book that it was based on in order to compare the two and decide which was better, the book or the film. And that was Jaws. So if you have not seen the film Jaws, then where have you been? What have you been doing? If you haven't read the book and you want a spoiler-free review, then I will pop a link in the description below and you can watch the wrap-up video that I made where I talked about this book. But otherwise, this video is going to be full of spoilers. So essentially, the plot of Jaws remains the same between the book and the film. We have a small beach town of Amity Island where there is a shark. People start getting attacked by this shark, and we have the chief of police who wants to close the beaches. There's the 4th of July holiday coming up. Tourists are going to just completely invade the place, and he wants to keep everybody safe. He wants, everybody to enjoy themselves, but just not go in the water. And we have the mayor of the town who is completely against this idea. He wants everybody to come on holiday, swim in the sea, enjoy the beaches, and he's pretty ignorant to the fears that Chief Brody has. And then the story goes on with, how are they going to get rid of this shark? How are they going to actually save people from being killed? The main plot is unchanged. That is the basic premise. But there are huge differences, and I was really surprised by some of the differences between the book and the film. And most of this comes from just the characters, the characterization, the way the characters are presented and developed. Our main character is Chief Brody, as I say, who is just a decent, sort of hard-working family man who wants to keep people safe. He was brilliantly played by Roy Schneider in the film. The difference between Chief Brody from the book and Brody from the film is, in the book, he's not always the loving, caring family man that he is in the film. He's slightly dismissive of his wife. He doesn't really pay a huge amount of attention to her. And then something happens with their relationship, and it's actually very difficult to determine who was to blame for what happens. We then have Ellen Brody, who is Chief Brody's wife, and she's completely different in the book to the film. In the film, she is just more of a supporting character. She is there to ground us to Chief Brody. She is there to be the sort of the heart and the link to him being this family man, this good all-American dad.
Don't use the fireplace in the den because I haven't fixed the flue yet. Tell him I'm going fishing.
Bring it up with you, Chief!
In the book, she has a much bigger role to play. Her character is much larger, and she has an entire subplot to herself, which I will talk about a little bit later. She, however, is not a particularly nice character. She, to me, came across as being very entitled, very spoiled, She came from quite a well-off family who did not approve of her relationship to Brody. So when she married him, she kind of lost the respect of a lot of people around her. And she wants that back. She wants her sort of posh friends who go out to lunch all the time and posh dinners instead of being stuck at home with her husband and kids. So even though she has this great family, she's really unappreciative of it. She doesn't appreciate the fact that she does have, this great family. She just wants to be able to look good to her friends. And then there is this additional storyline, which did her no favours whatsoever. And I was really quite disappointed with how Peter Benchley, the author, took her character, the direction he took her. I just didn't like it. Another character who gets much more fleshed out in the book than he did in the film, but whose subplot just is kind of ridiculous and unnecessary, is Larry Vaughan, the mayor. And he just ends up being this complete idiot. In the film, he's slightly annoying. He's very dismissive of Chief Brody. It's all about the money and getting the economy from the town and tourists and money coming in. And it's kind of understandable. You think he's an idiot, but you can still see his point of view. In the book, this is totally different. He isn't just about wanting tourists. He has an entire subplot of his own involving the mafia, which is just weird and bizarre, and I thought it was a little pointless. So he is also a real estate agent as well as the mayor, and the majority of his business dealings are apparently linked to the mafia. So he owes people money. I can't remember exactly how the mafia and his business dealings are linked, but there's this weird scene where Brody's cat gets killed, or his son's cat gets killed, and it's supposed to be a threat, telling Chief Brody that he has to basically listen to the mayor and do what he's been told. And it's just a really bizarre scene, and it just didn't really gel for me. It didn't really make sense. I think it actually made a lot more sense for the mayor to just be a bit of a bumbling idiot rather than him being involved in criminal activity. And then he just does a runner at the end. He basically just leaves town with his wife and runs away. So they actually end up being three of the main characters in the book, two of whom are not main characters in the film. They're really downgraded to supporting players. So we have all this going on, and then Brody decides that he needs to basically go out to sea. He needs to get a boat and he needs to go out and he needs to track down this shark.
Up Periscope. Ring for depth charge. Stand by fire drill. Down at control. Report weather bulletin. Nor'easter coming. Bad news for Madison Avenue.
So he contacts somebody who is a shark expert, and this guy called Matt Hooper turns up. And it turns out that he used to live in the area, and his brother dated Ellen Brody when they were a lot younger. So there's this backstory that we suddenly have with him and Ellen already knowing each other. And this is where the bizarre subplot comes in, because Ellen decides that she wants to have an affair. She isn't happy with her family life, she isn't happy with the way things are, so she's going to have an affair, and she picks Matt Hooper as the person she's going to do it with. So she arranges them to have lunch, and they meet up, and they have some of the most bizarre conversations I have ever read in a book. She has this theory that all schoolgirls have a fantasy about being a prostitute, And she also talks about having a rape fantasy. Now, I don't know about you, but if you do have a rape fantasy, then you need to speak to somebody. You need to be seeing a doctor, because this is not normal. This is not healthy. And not all women dream about being prostitutes or having rape fantasies. But there is this scene where she describes what she would like to happen to her, and Matt Hooper just kind of plays along with it. And they do go off, and then he ends up working with Chief Brody. And instead of there being this camaraderie, this comradeship like there is in the film, they are automatically antagonistic to each other. Chief Brody doesn't know that his wife's having an affair, but he is suspicious. He doesn't trust Hooper anyway. He hasn't liked the way that they've sort of interacted when he's been around. So he is suspicious. And Hooper kind of plays on this, and he winds him up and he teases him and he makes comments about Ellen. And so they're basically on this boat, and it's, you know, who's going to kill who first? Is it going to be them killing each other, or is the shark actually going to get a look in? So they're on this boat, and the other person who we have is Quint, who owns the boat that they're on. Now, he was played incredibly by Robert Shaw. I am a massive fan of Robert Shaw. He was a brilliant actor, and he brought this personality and gravitas, and he was a big guy. He was a big, tall, strong guy, and he brought that to the screen. In scenes, you were absolutely captivated by him. In the book, he is reduced to being this very small character who is not very nice. The difference between book and film Quint is that in the film there was this backstory regarding the ship being bombed. And he has that incredible scene where he talks about being in the water and being surrounded by sharks.
You know the thing about a shark? He's got lifeless eyes, black eyes, like a doll's eyes.
He has issues with the shark. He just wants this shark dead. Quint in the book, it's more of a sport. It's more of just something to do. He just seems to like killing, and it's not always fun to read. But he's just a really bland character. There's no humour to him at all. He doesn't jump off the page at all while you're reading. And he's a really disappointing character. I should point out with Hooper as well that I thought Richard Dreyfuss did a really great job. He came across as a little bit cocky, a little bit smug. He was clearly a very intelligent man, and he knows it, and he uses it against pretty much everybody else around him. I think everybody knows about the friction that there was between him and Robert Shaw, and that definitely plays out on camera.
Hey, I don't need this. I don't need this working class hero crap.
You're not going to do this aboard the ship, are you, Mr. Quint?
Maybe I should go alone.
In the book, however, that isn't there. All of the friction is between Hooper and Brody, and Hooper is basically just smug and cocky because he's been off with Brody's wife. It's got nothing to do with who he is, what he does, the fact that he knows so much more than everybody else about sharks. It's just the fact that he's just a complete moron. The main issue that I have with the book and the film is that actually there is very little shark action in the book. We have some overlapping scenes. So the very first shark attack that is in the film with, I think it's Chrissy, the skinny dipper. That is in the book, and the description of that shark attack is the most atmospheric scene in the book. It's also one of the most atmospheric scenes I've probably ever read. It's an incredible beginning, which is then let down by the rest of the story, unfortunately. But that first scene, you are there, you are in the water with her, and it's brilliant. There is another scene involving the child who gets killed, and his mother has a bit more to play. She's given a bit more to do. She gets a bit more of a scene, a bit more confrontation between her and Brody. But the scene itself kind of plays out like it does in the film. In the book, we get a lot more killings and shark attack, but they are not described quite as well as the first one especially. But there's no real atmosphere or sense of peril or dread that there is in the film. And I think a lot of that is to do with, we get the movement in the water, we see some of the shark. I know that, you get quite a way into the film before you actually see the shark for the first time. And when you do, it's quite shocking. But we do get scenes where we are in the water, almost as though we are the shark. And it just gets to me every single time I watch the film. I think that's why I love it so much. In the book, we're given a lot more description of how a shark moves, how they sense food, something that they can kill. And even though that does add to how we see the shark, it doesn't really bring a lot of atmosphere. So as I say, we get a couple more shark attacks in the book than there are in the actual film. Something that is very different though is what happens to Brody, Hooper and Quint on the boat. In the film, they go out to sea, they go out on the boat, they're out at sea, and they stay out there for the duration. In the book, they come back each night, and it's very bizarre. They go out sort of 3 days in a row, and it really broke the tension for me. It actually ruined the atmosphere, because if they had been out in the boat the whole time, like they were in the film, you have that sense of dread, of being out there at night, being isolated. You don't know where this creature is going to come from. You don't know what direction it's going to suddenly appear from. In the book, there's none of that, because they suddenly get to a point in the evening where they just get, okay, let's go home now, and they turn back. Something that's also very different with these three is that only one of them survives to the very end of the book. So Brody is basically our hero at the end. He is the last man standing. The deaths of Hooper and Quint are very different. So in the film, Hooper doesn't get killed, but he goes down in a cage and it gets ripped open by the shark. He escapes. He swims off into sort of, a crack in the rock or something and hides. In the film, he gets eaten. He goes down in the cage and the shark basically destroys it and eats him, and that's him gone. Quint, his death in the film it has never left me. It's devastating. It's a brutal ending to an absolutely fantastic character. In the book, the shark gets harpooned and dies, and goes down, and Quint, from what I remember, got tangled up in some ropes and various things, and he basically gets dragged under with the shark and drowns. So he has a very different ending, and it's not dramatic in the slightest. It's actually quite sad, because he was downgraded to such a tiny character, such a tiny part, that he just didn't get the ending that he deserved. In the film, he was a much bigger character, so he got a much bigger death. In the book, he just literally just slides under the water and disappears, which also means that the actual shark gets a less dramatic ending. The ending of the film, I mean, it's slightly nonsensical, but then, I mean, you watch all the other Jaws films that they made and suddenly it becomes the most realistic thing you'll ever see. Brody basically blows the shark up,
You son of a...
which is a little bit funny. In the book, as I say, he just gets harpooned and that's it. He dies. and just disappears into the water, and that's it, and then Brody swims home. It's a disappointing ending to a disappointing book that was somehow turned into one of the best known films ever made. Everybody knows something about Jaws the film, whether it's that theme tune, whether it's a quote.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Everybody knows something about it. Just the fact that it's about sharks in general. Everybody knows what a great white shark is because of this film. Something that I think is also actually really important to mention is that Peter Benchley recognised that as soon as this book came out and as soon as the film came out, people's attitudes to sharks took a turn. People, I don't think, had necessarily really thought about sharks very much at all. And then this film came out and suddenly sharks, and especially great white sharks, were seen as the enemy. And eventually realised that he was potentially part of something destructive and negative, and that sharks are only dangerous because they want feeding. And the fact is that we are the ones going in the water. We are going into their homes and disrupting them. So he became massively involved in shark conservation, getting involved in all sorts of groups, and really bringing awareness to the fact that sharks are just wanting to survive. That's all they are doing. They are surviving. And that we as people have absolutely no right to be going into the water and killing them. If we are killing them because we are afraid of them, then we shouldn't be going into the water in the first place. My overall opinion of Jaws book versus film is that the film is far better. The film is absolutely incredible. It's one of my favourite films ever. I have absolutely no idea how many times I've seen it. The best thing about getting to make this video is that I have actually got Jaws playing on mute next to me while I'm making this, so that I get some ideas of things that I want to say, and it just gives me a bit of a reminder. The book is just weird. It's a brilliant example of them just taking the few good bits, extracting them out, and then building something else around it. Something that I also should mention about the book is that there is some very casual racism involved, which I was really surprised by. I was not expecting it at all. There's some of the scenes where they're talking about trying to get tourists and trying to encourage more people to visit the area. There are scenes where they talk about a black man having raped a white woman and how they still want people to visit and let them know that it's a safe area to come to. But there's real emphasis on the fact that this man was black. It's just described as a black man. And there's a few times where it's a black man did this, a black man did that. There's never a mention of a white man did something. And I know it's of the time, this was written in the 70s, late 60s, the 70s, something around that time. But it's still very difficult to get your head around how you can write a book and think that the only way you can describe somebody is by their skin colour and just say he's a black man. And that also has something to do with why this woman was raped or who raped her. And this notion that they need to be wary of any black people in the area, and that having too many black people will be a reason for tourists not to come. It's a little weird. It's another aspect that was just unnecessary. It's like the whole rape fantasy thing. It just wasn't needed in this book at all. You know, if Ellen wanted to go and have an affair, she could have just gone and had an affair. There was no need for her to ever be talking about something so horrific in such a sort of blasé, relaxed way. It's annoying. I don't like it. So, I mean, overall, I did enjoy this read. It wasn't It wasn't a book that I hated. This was okay. I'm glad I read it purely so that I can compare and say, do you know what? The film was better. I always knew it would be. This just kind of cemented my opinion. I would love to know if anybody out there has seen the film, read the book and preferred the book. I'd love it. Let me know in the comments. If you prefer the Book of Jaws to the film, let me know. Tell me why. Change my mind. Convince me that this book is brilliant. So I would love to make some more of these videos where I compare books and films. So if you have any ideas, just drop them in the comments. So that is it for today. I will be back with another video. I hope you are well, and I will see you next time. Bye.